Today is Tisha B'Av, the ninth day of the Jewish month of Av, a day where our hearts historically turn to the city of Jerusalem, remembering disasters and destructions that have befallen our people in years past, and to which, through missteps and failures of values, judgment, and leadership, our people have contributed in those generations. Primarily, the destruction of the first and second temples took place historically on this date. Those temples were not centers of unity and agreement among the Jewish people. We've never been good at such things, but rather a place at least where all of us could disagree about a focal point that helped to make the Jewish people one people. This has been a painful and challenging week for those who love the Jewish people and the state of Israel, because the level of disagreement and conflict with our people, amongst our people, has never been higher. Earlier this week, a piece of legislation was passed in Israel that was regarded as so full of conflict and disagreement that the Israeli opposition walked out, refusing to vote. And it passed in 120-member Knesset, 164-0. This legislation is deeply troubling, but is not the topic of my remarks today. It is not this one piece of legislation that is threatening the unity or the future of the Jewish people. It is instead the process, the level of conflict, the directions chosen by the current Israeli government that believes that hundreds of thousands of voices in protest in Israel, that messages to slow down, to consult, to create agreement rather than discord, to come up with some kind of compromise rather than winning and losing. This government has decided that none of those voices matter, but rather that the 64 Knesset votes of the coalition are enough. Tisha B'Av is not a day that's about Israeli politics. It's about our willingness to recognize the lessons of the past, to see that when we have played on disagreement and discord amongst our people, when we have refused to recognize and listened to one another, and when we have sought to be victorious in a position rather than to seek compromise and understanding among the Jewish people, that the results in the past have proven catastrophic. We must do more in today's world than pray that the current disagreements centered upon Israel and the city of Jerusalem, we must do more than pray that they not be catastrophic. We must raise our voices. We must first speak to those whom we know in Israel, those who are deeply troubled by the conflict, whether they agree with the government's legislation or not. And I know precious few who seem to agree with it. We must reach out to them, as I have to the leaders of our sister congregations there and our movement there, to say, we are with you, our hearts are with you, our support for an Israel that respects the values of democracy and the variety of its citizens is unflagging. And we will continue to work with you for the Israel that is in the model of Israel's Declaration of Independence. In addition, we need to speak up with others vocally, not in conflict, but in sharing our values and our understandings that Israel must be, in reality, a pluralistically Jewish and vibrantly democratic state. Do not be misguided by statements that may be released. The current government of the state of Israel seems to support neither a pluralistically Jewish, meaning an inclusively Jewish future for the state, nor a vibrantly democratic one. Yes, the government's draconian directions have caused a reawakening of Israeli democracy. But the law that was passed this week, that law is part of and supported by those who reject the very basic values of a balanced democracy that balances the needs, desires, and directions of the majority with protecting the rights and opportunities of the minorities. This is the very definition of democracy. And many who are ministers of this current government reject that direction wholeheartedly. This is a very difficult time for the Jewish people, because while a law in the Knesset may seem to some like it is distant from the day-to-day reality of Jews in the diaspora, nearly half of the Jewish population in the world currently live in Israel and call Israel home. And Israel on the world stage represents Judaism and the Jewish people, whether that would be our choice in a given day or not. And so therefore, we need to raise our voices. And we also, if we are troubled by these items, I'll speak again tomorrow morning at Boker Tov and on Shabbat here at Temple this week about some more of the details involved in this moment. If we are troubled, we need to raise our voices and speak to those in leadership at Federation and at CIJA. Speak to those who are leaders in Jewish organizations with which we may be affiliated beyond our connection to the Temple Sinai family, and say, this direction is deeply troubling. The willingness to trample opposition and refuse to compromise on basic issues is destructive, and that we stand for a better Jewish future than this week and the events in Israel in the Knesset represent. We stand strongly with the peaceful protesters who in the hundreds of thousands have said the Jewish future must be a place of vibrant democracy, of pluralistic, inclusive Judaism, and of a willingness to hear and work with those with whom we disagree. I hope that we can continue to model these directions in our own experience, and that we can call upon community leaders and those whose voices will be recognized to take a public stand, not for one side of the Israeli political spectrum or another, but for the values of democracy and pluralism, of openness and inclusiveness and understanding that allow for vibrant Jewish life anywhere in the world. On this Tisha B'Av, this day where we remember the kind of destructions that we have survived in the past, we recommit ourselves to working for a better Jewish future and to standing up to those who reject the kind of values that allow our Judaism to thrive and flourish. The Shabbat is Shabbat Nachamu, a time after Tisha B'Av, of comfort. May we find comfort not in survival, but in a willingness to live for and stand up for the values that make our tradition a place of understanding and inclusion, a place that brings our people together and recognizes our connection with those outside of our people. May this day be a time where we learn real lessons and show others going forward that we're willing to work for a better future. Ken Yehi Ratzon.